We will now start the session titled Cutting Through the Noise, Identifying the Next Big Thing in AI. This is panel discussion number 4. The moderator is media artist and associate professor of University of Tsukuba, Mr. Yoichi Ochiai. Panelists, Sapphire Ventures president, partner, and co-founder, Mr. J-StarX, then Menlo Ventures managing director, Mr. Matt Murphy. Mr. Ochiai, Mr. Das, Mr. Murphy, please.
So thank you for joining us.
Absolutely.
So we'd like to start our panels. So I'm Yoichi Ochiai, a media artist and associate professor of the University of Tsukuba, and also I'm CEO of the Pixie Technologies, and just IPO'd NASDAQ in August. So I'm really excited to have it here, and also actually I'm really interested in the generative AI because of I'm doing the research in the computer science field and consequently 8 years, and I'm also researching the large language models and also the applications for the users. So because of the current 2 years, the generative AI is so fast. So everything got struggles and makers, and also some buzzword happening, and also some like environmental change in the academic field and also the business industry field. So because of that, actually, what is two things, or what is a buzzword, and what is a need to invest, or these things should be discussed in also Japan and also globally. So we'd like to start with some presentations over both of you. So Jay goes first.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yep.
Good afternoon, folks. My name is J-StarX, and I'm the president and co-founder of Sapphire Ventures. First of all, I would like to thank the Ministry of Economy, Trade, and Industry, as well as the World Innovation Lab, for inviting me to this conference, and of course, for their outstanding hospitality. Japan has always been on my bucket list of countries to visit, and this is my first time here, and my experience from traveling the last few days in Tokyo and Kyoto has surpassed all my expectations. The politeness and the friendliness of the people here, and the culture and the food has made me want to come back soon. I'm planning to do that sometime early next year with my family. At Sapphire, we empathize with the entrepreneurs since we think of ourselves as founders and entrepreneurs ourselves. We started about 10 years ago with 6 people and about 350 million under management. And since then, we have gone on to raise 6 funds and currently manage about 11 billion and have over 100 people in the firm. We understand how difficult it is to build category-defining companies, and we are always looking to help founders build what we call companies of consequence. We primarily invest in enterprise software companies, including a lot of AI companies that we'll discuss about. And we typically invest when these companies have achieved product market fit. So it's typically, companies are raising their Series B onwards and have at least 8 to 10 million in ARR. That's when we invest. We have been very fortunate. We have had over 30 IPOs and over 45 M&As in the 10, 11 years that we have been in existence. We have a few guiding principles. First and foremost is dedication to winning, and that is not only for the firm, but mostly for our portfolio companies. And when we mean by winning is that they become successful and become large companies of consequence. We want to be agile and supportive and try to get resources to our portfolio companies as soon as possible. In areas and cases when we had the SVB crisis in the US, we actually spent a lot of time helping our portfolio companies make payroll. We want to be authentic in the way we work and collaborate with founders. And finally, integrity is one of the key principles, since this is how we interact with our founders as well as all our investment partners. As I mentioned before, we focus mostly on enterprise software that have achieved product market fit. We focus a lot on unit economics and finding companies that have repeatable and scalable and efficient business models, because what we have found are those are the companies that go on to become IPOable and kind of stay on to be category-defining companies. We have a long tenure in investing in enterprise software, And we always believe in taking a hands-on approach, and we want to be the most value-added investor on the cap table. We have been rated as one of the top VCs in a number of companies that we have backed in the Cloud 100. But the thing that we are most proud of is that we have also been rated as one of the most founder-friendly investors out there. We approach enterprise software in two different areas. So, first and foremost, we focus a lot on what we call business applications. And and the second area that we focus on is what we call infrastructure software. Within business applications, we have different areas, like we have future of work, we have vertical SaaS, we have digital health, and on the infrastructure side, we include cybersecurity, data analytics, AI ML. That is like a key thesis and key focus for our team right now. To wrap it up, I wanted to reiterate that we at Sapphire Ventures are looking to help founders scale from 10 to 15 million to 200 million and beyond, and to an IPO, with customer and talent introductions, helping scale their go-to-market teams, and crystallize their exit strategies, that be through M&A or through IPO. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jay. So, Matko, next, please.
Sure. Trying to get this to work. Well, anyway, thanks, Jay, for teeing things off like that, because I think you said a lot of things that I wanted to express as well. The hospitality on this trip and just the whole experience has been very eye-opening. It reminds me of many other cities and geographies I've been to, as the venture ecosystem is really starting to take off. The energy in this building and in the breakout room, et cetera, was just palpable. So really great to be here and be part of it. I know oftentimes at these conferences, there's kind of this like, what's the next big idea? And the short one I have for you, we'll talk about more later, is somebody has to come up with a cure for jet lag, because we need to do a lot more business together, and I can't do as good a job of that if I can only sleep until 3 a.m. So we'll fix that, hopefully, next time. Anyway, my name is Matt Murphy. I'm a partner at Menlo Ventures. I've been at Menlo for 8 years. I was at a firm called Kleiner Perkins before that for 15 years. Some highlights in my career that I think are very relevant to this topic and where we're going with generative AI. I joined Kleiner a month after we invested in Google, and I went to every Google board meeting until IPO. So it's kind of like in terms of how we thought about the browser as being the interface for all content. About midway through my tenure there, we did a $200 million collaborative fund with Apple, called the iFund, at the kind of birth of the iPhone, where they wanted a capital and company building partner, invested in companies like DocuSign and Shazam. And so, the mobile ecosystem is very relevant to what is going on here in generative AI, and to have kind of lived that before and seen that makes this time even more exciting. This is a bit about our firm. So we've raised $5.6 billion to date, returned almost $9 billion, and have a lot more companies that will make that number go up over time. That's comprised of over 80 IPOs and over 160 M&A events, and associated with companies whose combined market cap is over $300 billion. This is the managing partner group of the firm. We have 12 partners total. We're not very hierarchical, but this slide just shows 3 of us, so you can see some faces here. The opportunity for me at Menlo was very unique. This was a great opportunity to take a long-standing firm that was going through generational transition and be part of it with these three partners. It's great to have a 47-year-old firm and then have this new generation. So Sean on the left has been at Menlo for 20 years. Venki's been there for 11, and I've been there now in my 9th year. So a lot of long-standing success together. We've invested $1.9 billion, and collectively these 3 partners have carried value of $9 billion of returns. Let's see, a little bit more about us. So we are a thematic firm. If you think about different venture firms, you can be kind of opportunistic, looking for the best deal. But we really have, across our 12 partners, is focus on kind of a fund stage strategy as well as these sectors. So these are the 5. And generally a partner will cover 1 to 2 of these areas. And then across these areas, we really have 3 different motions. We have a labs fund, which incubates companies from whole cloth with founders. We have a venture fund, which does normal kind of seed, Series A, maybe early Series B. And then we have an early growth fund called our Inflection Fund, which invests in companies for between 3 and 10 million of ARR. So Jay and I just kind of overlap on that margin there. This is just a little bit more on the portfolio. Proud to have 22 unicorns, and unicorns are kind of it's what drives our business. It's a power law outlier business, as we all know. So to have quite a few here and more coming is exciting. And this is what you need to make our business great. And I think that it also takes platform shifts like generative AI, like we saw in mobile. So let's shift to that a little bit and talk about what's going on in generative AI. And the whole panel is going to be about that, so I don't want to steal too much thunder, but I just want to take a little bit of time to provide an overview of how we're looking at generative AI. So there's a lot of market maps out there. This is a pretty simple one. But if you look at the bottom 2 layers, you have kind of hardware chips, then you've got the kind of cloud service providers. Probably not areas where there'll be a lot of venture investment going, just given the strengths of incumbents, the dollars required to go there. If you kind of bump up a layer from there, we have the closed source LLMs and then the open source LLMs, so a lot of activity there. Although in the closed source LLMs, we really think the world will converge down to Anthropic and OpenAI, and we happen to be an investor in Anthropic, which was rumored last week to have raised an additional $6 billion, so pretty stunning what's going on in these areas. The 2 layers above that, we call the tooling layer. That's everything from DevOps, ML operations, observability, training, all those kind of things about models. So this is kind of the picks and shovel area of generative AI. And generally when these new stacks, these new trends emerge, there's a new stack. If you remember in the new data stack, you had Snowflake, Databricks, DBT, Fivetran, things like that. So this infrastructure layer has to come together to make the application layer possible. We're absolutely interested in the application layer. As you see here, we've got 3 companies in the orange box, which means they're a Menlo investment. And so that's going to be long-term, many more long tail of successes out of that area, but nearer term, the picks and shovels that make it possible, where we think most of the action is. That's kind of reinforced on this slide here. I won't spend more time on this. It just kind of breaks the 4 buckets of investment opportunity around generative AI and kind of where our sweet spot is in green, yellow. Not really any red on here. It's too exciting of a time for there to be any red. Now, generative AI, as I mentioned, is the opportunity in picks and shovels infrastructure very strong right now. Applications are interesting, but you have to be careful in applications right now because there's a lot of potential commoditization. So this is just examples of 3 verticals in generative AI applications, and you look even at this stage of kind of this wave of new companies, there's 5 or 6 in every category. So what we ask ourselves is, you don't want to find a false positive of an early company that then gets commoditized later. So what are really the attributes and things that make an application company potentially stand out over time and make it investable? And so this next slide is a little bit of the rubric we use. We call it it's kind of our decoder to a treasure map. And so there's not time to go into the slide here, but if you look at on the left-hand column, there's a number of attributes. So is the company innovating on top of the LLMs? Do they have a technical team that's complementing off-the-shelf LLMs with their own custom models? Is there some custom data or a proprietary data set they have, for example, that's never going to end up in the LLMs? The LLM's just not going to be relevant to that data set. Another attribute is, is the application replacing a very high-cost worker? So there's a lot of activity in the legal vertical right now because lawyers and paralegals are expensive. So if you can replace high-cost workers, there's more of a sense of urgency and easier buying cycle for, for companies. So these are just some of the attributes that we find very relevant. We'll talk more about it today. But again, this is our treasure map, and there's going to be lots of treasures in this area, so good luck finding yours, and excited to talk more. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for both presentations. So it is about roadmap from the startup towards IPO, and also it is treasure maps around the AI field and about almost applications. So actually, first questions I'd like to start to both of you. And so actually, I was a PhD when it was a deep learning movement happened, from the 2006 to the 2011 or 12. After that, it's gonna be shifted to the large scale model age. It means going to the large language models, or these kind of things happened. So that was my professor years. So because of that, I'm doing the assistant professor in Japan. So actually, how do you think about what's the difference between the fast deep learning growth in the 2006 to the 2014 or 15, this kind of the age that ImageNet happened, or everything pattern recognition models, or this kind of thing happened. However, this age, actually it is easy to access such a ChatGPT or OpenAI APIs or Hugging Face or Stability AI. Anything can be used by API. So what is a buzzword, or what is should be to investment? So actually, how do you think about this trend currently, this 1 or 2 years? So firstly, please, Jay.
Yeah, so what I would say is that deep learning has been going on for a long time.
Yeah.
If you go on, there were neural networks that were out there. I went to school in the 90s. There was a lot of deep learning, and there was people went to UC San Diego. I think what changed, and the current deep learning and the generative AI models are basically have taken from that. They have made some tweaks to it, but it's not fundamentally new things. Mm-hmm. What has changed is that the amount of compute that is out there and the amount of storage, right? Which has really driven the models to be a lot better, because now you can basically use the whole web to train these models. So the two things that happened was the World Wide Web with so much information and the ability to get the compute and the storage necessary to train these models to that point where they kind of give back you all these intelligent answers, right?
Yep.
Those things happen, and that is why we are in this phase of generative AI, and it wouldn't have happened if these two things hadn't been in existence.
Yeah, because of the many providers or suppliers for the storage or machine power, such as Google platforms or AWS, it is easy to access, and also that is fundamentally amount of the computational environment change.
That's right.
So that's what is the mother of the this movement, and also actually different question to the Matt. So how is application area you think should be invested to? Actually, you see the highly costed professional jobs such as a medical field or low areas. So how do you think more, or how do you think about these to choose these application areas?
Yeah, well, I mentioned some of the attributes there. I think that the problem with a lot of applications right now.
Yep.
Existing startups, incumbents, they're all just bolting on generative AI. And so if you remember when there was the mobile revolution, it all started off with games and simple applications, and then it took a while for people to figure out what would be really cool, big ideas, things to do, and that's when Uber and Snap came out and things like that. So I think for us as investors, we want to be patient and yet have a sense of urgency, because there will right now be that Salesforce. Think about Salesforce. It was the early SaaS company by 10 plus years, and it's still one of the biggest. But then there was a whole train wreck between then and another long tail of SaaS startups 10 years later. So in this business, you don't want to be over-rotated too early or too late. But I think right now, what we're really looking for is people doing novel things, and I'll give one example. So we backed the CTO of Adobe in his company called Typeface. And what his intuition was is that the Adobe creative stack needed to be reinvented using generative AI. And secondly, that a lot of companies would never want their proprietary data to go into an LLM. So what he built is kind of an open source model where you take all your company assets and put it in an open source model, and you train the model around your brand, your voice, your look, your feel, and then you use the LLM to complement that. So one of the things we look for in application space is how are people combining these things, their own proprietary models, open source models, and the LLM at the end of the day is a really smart writer, but you have to use all the other models to do the hard, complex computation.
Yeah. So actually, the second question is for the more like the difference between the regions. So actually, like for Japan or for China or for the United States or EU or European unions, actually like these kind of the regulations between like to training or to using the copyright programs or these kinds of things depend on the regions. Actually, that is not so much like that is so much different from the, like Google search or Facebook connections. However, like for the training generative AI or for using the like more like industrial use, I think these kind of the regulations should be needed to like compare between the area to area, such like Japan to the United States or EU. What do you prospect or what do you think about like these kind of regional difference for the like activity in the LLMs or generative AIs or recent trends?
Yeah. Look, I think you know, there's going to be two things. Like one, every region will have its localized models.
Yes.
Will also, you know, it's going to be one of these things where every region will have to build up an ecosystem of, you know, research, of engineers, of people who can actually work with these, you know, large language models and train on the data for that country, but also build applications and kind of, you know, useful things on top of it. And I think, but there will also be, just like everything else, a global kind of a standard where you will have, you know, like some language models and some kind of a hyperscaler that will come out that will provide the infrastructure for everybody.
Yes.
And I do think that data security, the data privacy, the data lineage, all of these things are going to become large problems. And in some ways, it's a good thing for investors because entrepreneurs will be out there trying to solve these kind of issues. You know, how do you do data governance? How do you make sure that data from one country to the other or from one user to the other doesn't leak? And there will be solutions for that.
But how do you think about like how the investors or venture capital can do with like making like new criteria, new or partnerships, or what is needed for these situations?
Yeah, I mean, I think that what we all don't know yet is different geographies will think about privacy and risk differently.
Yes.
And so that's going to evolve over some period of time. You already know the US Congress, there's been a number of efforts to maybe slow down, stop the evolution of AI for a while. That's kind of passed. But right now, the belief is it can do more good than bad. We'll see whether that plays out right. But I think each country and region is going to have a position on that. And that position will evolve as we learn more and see how these are used. So I think that's kind of true of any new medium. You know, look at the internet and all the kind of both scary and amazing things that happened there. So we'll kind of figure out as we go, and I think it's too early to have a strong position.
Actually, like you mentioned about the medical things and like lawyer things, that is more like deeply inside of each customers or cultures or each like countries. So how do you like reformat or localize your like your investors, your like startups, like application towards each local models? It is about the United States or like more globally do the service?
Yeah, I mean, I think for the most part, we invest in companies that we want to be global. We don't really think about a US-centric company. The vast majority of companies that we fund are most successful in the US to start. Then they go to Europe and APAC. That's kind of the general, you know, evolution. But I think the underlying substrate should be geographically independent. But then there's so many local things. Like if you think about payroll in any country versus the US, or I was talking to an entrepreneur earlier, I'm on the board of Carta, and there's no such thing as a 409A here in Japan, so you probably don't even know what I'm talking about, but it's a way to value companies, their common stock. And so you would, if Carta comes here, a good part of their business just isn't relevant, but there may be some new opportunity that they're not thinking about. So I think that every company has to think about a geography and what are the specific needs that might be different from their home geography.
And one other thing is that you also have to stop thinking of large language models.
Yes.
You just have to think about language models, right? Because there will be applications where you want the language models to be very accurate and train on very specific set of data. Because you don't need that language model to write you a rap song by Drake or anything like that, right? You just need it to kind of give you some really good insight into prediction of maybe some cancer cure or some other thing, right? Where you train it on. So I think that is where it gets lost in some of these applications that are going to be built are going to have their own language models, which are not required to be trained, but in such a widely and will take so much, billions of dollars to train those models.
I'll give an example of that. So we just funded a company for mental health. And so there's essentially a bot that listens to the therapist talking to the patient, and it's constantly diagnosing and coming up with medical notes in the background. So if you think about a therapist, they have the session, then they have to go over and write their notes. They're busy back to back. Maybe they missed something. So the model comes in and tells them what they think the diagnosis is, as well as come up with session notes. Saves them probably 20 minutes per patient they meet. But to Jay's points, it's actually its own data, because you're never going to share that kind of patient data in an open model. You have to do it in a closed model. So this is where companies are going to really innovate with their own smaller or open source models.
Exactly.
Yeah, that is good point. And also, actually, I'm really interested in the development of the Gen AI. Actually, because you mentioned about the specific language model for the specific areas, especially actually like for the development, like for doing the Pythons or doing coding. Actually, like language model is really growing fast. So actually, that it is easy to develop the front end code or everything can be easier in the engineering field. Actually, we can use it, adapt it. So last 1.5 years, we are dramatically changing development. So actually, how do you think about these kind of service development sections of each startup? Actually, Gen AI is effectively change the style of the development in that field. So how do you think to invest about engineering or each startup about cost for the effect of the Gen AI? How do you think?
I can go first, Matt. I will say that, first and foremost, what Copilot has done, I kind of think software development is the single most expensive content that you can create, right? And the cost of software development has never gone down, right? If you look at everything else, cost of CPU, storage have always been going down. Software development has always gone up. And I think this is the first time with Copilot and all the other products that's going to get developed, that cost is going to go down. But I don't think it is going to be engineering. You still need computer science. You need developers. I think what it's going to end up doing is kind of do all the work that developers don't want to do. Because I started out my career as a developer. First and foremost, writing tests, right? No developer wants to write test code, right? And you'll have Gen AI kind of, go in there and write all these test code and everything for you. Things like changing, from one language to another. All of these things that developers hate to do will be kind of what all the Copilot and the other products will do, and make software development much faster and much easier, and maybe even enable people who are not very focused on being software developers, do a no-code, low-code kind of application development.
Yeah, I was going to say, Jay took my thought, but because everybody knows that copilots are going to make people a bit better, but if you look at kind of end-to-end developer activity from the moment you write a line of code until it's in production, there's a whole journey there, so much that goes on. Developer toil is a big term that's used. So what Jay's saying is if you can eliminate testing, there's front-end testing, regression testing, system testing. If more of that can be automated, it's a huge win for productivity, and because no one really wants to do that work. And then as you start thinking about automating, pushing things into production and having automatic orchestration, dispatch, rollback, all those kind of things are going to be really exciting to just help us kind of continue to increase the pace at which innovation and code comes out.
Yeah. So Actually, like a little bit slightly go to the different sections. So actually, like it is really difficult to or hard to like catch up new advancements this field because of the like every month like almost 1,000 applications will be you can find on the internet or a service will be released in here. So because of that, actually many like services so float like a lot of papers or a lot of like services, GitHub code, anything will be mixed now. So actually, how do you doing the catch up these kind of technical trends, such as try a copilot, or how do you like catch up these kind of trends?
Oh, how do we stay on top of everything that's going on? So yeah,
Matt has a harder job than I do.
Yeah, no, yeah. The reason why Jay's saying that is because we try to go earlier, so we kind of have to intercept it before it's obvious.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of good tooling now on open source projects as they spike. So we have a daily Slack bot that pushes out to us a view of open source projects and how they're trending.
Yep.
As a thesis and research-driven firm, we do the market map you saw. We do much deeper ones. We're constantly talking to our founders, our entrepreneurs, our network. Right now, we're doing a study with over 50 kind of leaders in deploying generative AI and understanding where their challenges and opportunities are. So it's a lot of primary research to really understand what's going on the kind of buyer or implementer side. And then the other way you learn is by meeting entrepreneurs. We learn from each other. We learn together. And then we get to meet so many great entrepreneurs, and you start to pattern match and kind of see kind of clusters and heat maps of where things are interesting.
So we, so one of the things, so we have a little bit of an easier job because we come in later, so we look for revenues and traction, right? So we kind of know from the revenue, like, okay, they have some traction, they're doing well. But it still you have to predict kind of what's going on, and you also have to know what is coming so that you're aware of it. So a couple of things that we have done is one, we have an AI strategy team that is out there meeting with, not only startups, but also large enterprises, because a lot of time what we invest in are bought by enterprises as they deploy generative AI or any kind of product in the enterprise. So we have a strategy team that is doing that. And then the other thing we are doing is, we talk to a lot of our portfolio companies. We have about 90 portfolio companies. So all the product managers, all the VPs of engineering, they're all doing something around generative AI. So we talk to them to understand, okay, what is working, what is not working. Because right now, people are trying to figure out how to implement and code generative AI into their products, right? It's not well kind of established kind of patterns, things like that. So those are also our indicators about what things are working and what things are not working.
Okay, yeah. Actually, that is my second question is really related to that one. Yeah, because of the I have our own laboratory in the university, and also I have many students, almost 50 students for doing a PhD or something. And because of that, actually, everyone can do with OpenAI API or any API we can find and connecting, and also make it if we ignore the waiting time of each API calculation time and cost. Almost everything can be do because of if you wait from in front of the computer just 1 hour, okay, something come from. However, this kind of computational cost or that API cost or storage or everything now connected. However, I think that is cost oriented, time and space, and also the environment. The computational environment, such as storage or API cost. So how do you think about this? Almost it is a business and calculation cost connections, and also for the service quality, that is the API waiting time or everything needed to adjust everything. So how do you think about that is available or not available? I mean, you talking about the availability of each services or each connections. However, we should understand computational environment cost, calculation time or storage or everything. So how do you get the report about that?
You want me?
You go ahead.
Okay. Look, I think it is still some things that people are figuring it out.
Yeah.
Right now, people are just excited about features and getting things out there. And and there is and I wouldn't say free capital,
Yeah.
but like companies like OpenAI and stuff and Anthropic have raised billions of dollars, right?
Yeah.
So they are not really thinking about cost, and they're just thinking about, I think, implementing the features, getting the the product out there. That's what people are focused on.
Yeah.
And they're all optimizing for time for sure, right?
Yeah.
I think over time people will optimize for cost. I think there will be solutions that will come out and people will figure out, like right now, when people move to the cloud,
Yeah.
people didn't think about cloud costs,
Yeah.
right? It
Cloud
was
costs,
like,
yes.
okay, whatever I'm going to use, I'll start up a server and then shut it down whenever I need. But all of a sudden, when margins are really important right now, all of a sudden cloud cost management solutions have
Yes.
become the rage. I think it's going to be the same way. Like at some point when people have to make money and have to go public or sell or do whatever and have to look at the gross margins, that's when they're going to start optimizing for cost.
Got it. So how do you think about the optimizations and also the stabilization about the cost in what the time takes? Like, how do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Jay's point. I think right now there's kind of a gold rush to get applications out, and price is kind of a lagging indicator. A lot of these companies aren't big enough yet to worry about that. They're just kind of trying to get out there and win the race, and then when you get to scale, you can worry about optimization. I do think that we're seeing kind of two worlds. You're seeing one is kind of like a master craftsman world where people are building everything from the ground up. Maybe they're using an open source model. They're figuring out how to string various models together. They're doing their own ML ops, all those kind of things. And then there's these emerging players that look more like a platform as a service, a PaaS. If you think about different ways to develop applications currently, there's kind of a PaaS, or you can do it on your own. And so I think there are things like a company I'm on the board of, Clarify, Replicate, Base 10. There's a wave of companies coming out that kind of have all the components and building blocks in there that allow you to build your application more quickly and just get it out. And then you're relying on that PaaS vendor to push down the infrastructure costs instead of you trying to do it all via hand-to-hand combat. So I think we'll see something similar to that.
Got it. So how do you think it is the ecosystem now a little bit changed before, or it is not still same from the cloud platforms? About actually, I wanted to say about the current 2 years. This kind of open source models is so much in the cloud, and so how do you think the connection between the cloud vendors or each engineers should be trended to the cloud side or more startup side, or what is ecosystem changed in 2 years?
Well, I mean, this is also new, but I mentioned Anthropic before, and so you've got two cloud behemoths like Google and Amazon putting massive dollars in. So I think that tells you one thing, that they don't really feel like they've got their strategies completely down. I think that a company like Google has different sides to their business. They have an infrastructure business where they just want compute and storage, and then they've got an application business. So in the application business, they're partnering with Anthropic both to make sure that the best compute jobs end up on their infrastructure, but also to use that and take that over to their applications and make all of their applications smarter via an LLM. So it's kind of an interesting dynamic with the cloud providers now, where they can, to some extent, this can be existential to Google search, right? So they're all kind of hedging their bets, where they're partnering up with someone and building this technology into their applications as quickly as possible. So it's going to be really interesting to see this, the way this rolls out. If you look at just a little more on this, if you contrast this with when mobile rolled out, like the issue with mobile, real phones, new phones that have a computer interface on it, the ecosystem was held back because there was 1 million, then there were 4 million, then 10 million. The great thing about generative AI is today, every node, every person is accessible through existing applications with generative AI. So we're just seeing the explosion of this happen much more quickly.
Yeah, look, I think the hyperscalers will be there, right? You're going to have Microsoft, you're going to have AWS, you're going to have GCP, and maybe I think in Asia, Alibaba, will going to be all, and then Oracle probably in there. And I think in the next layer, in the LLM layers, right? I think there's going to be 3 companies, right? Whether they're going to be standalone or going to be part of one of the big cloud vendors. I don't know, but I think it's going to be OpenAI, Anthropic, and Cohere, right?
Yeah.
I think that's going to be the foundational kind of layers of the kind of equivalent to what the hyperscalers are.
Yeah.
I think the things that going to be built first is foremost is applications, right? Who are going to use either all of these or kind of will go with one of the OpenAI kind of large language model providers. And then over time, there's going to be middleware, right? That's going to come in and kind of enable you to manage all of that stuff. But I wouldn't count out the hyperscalers. I think they have enough resources, they have enough money. I think the big challenge is really the GPUs, right?
Yeah.
Because there's really only one GPU provider right now.
Yeah.
And the reality is that they have this kind of chokehold because of CUDA.
Yeah.
And until people get these models to work on something other than CUDA, you're beholden to NVIDIA for everything.
Yeah, that should be, because of the, everyone wants a GPU, and also Japanese government buys GPU so much, and also, so actually in that, from the different point of view, so actually I'm really interested in how to reach the academia and also business things, because of the such Japanese government investment for the ACBI, that is national computational resources for the these academics or industrial players, and also this kind of public and also the business relations is really important for the new development, because of the current 15 years for deep learning or this kind of the computational area is really strong relationship with such Jeffrey Hinton or this kind of deep learning laboratory to Google Brain or Google's or Amazon's or many OpenAI founders, OpenAI engineers came from that areas.
Right.
So actually, this kind of the academies and industrial connections is really important. How do you catch up this academic or development, or how do you think about between the connections, academia and the industry for right now, current ages for Gen AI?
Yeah, I mean, I think academia forms a lot of open source. Open source is increasingly going to be important in this ecosystem as people look for alternatives. I also think it's an amazing training ground for people who end up in companies and do great things. And I think that industry and academia kind of understand where industry has kind of got it covered and where academia needs to innovate, maybe on a little bit more of a longer time frame.
Yeah, different ways or different directions.
Commercial businesses are kind of like, we need this to work now. And so academia can take a little bit of a longer term view, which is very good.
Yeah, as I mentioned, right, I think one of the good models to kind of look at is a Canadian one, right? So Jeff Hinton there, who's kind of known as the OG of AI, right? He was at Google Brain and everything. He came out and he started this initiative where he kind of started this Vector Research Institute, right? Which is kind of has the government, has all the universities, as well as all the large enterprises, all kind of contributing and figuring out how to work together. So that is a great model, because if you look at it, Canada not only is producing a lot of really good AI and machine learning talent, but there's also a lot of startups coming out of it, right? Because of this whole process. So you need somebody like Jeff Hinton or somebody to kind of go and get everybody together in a room, because it's not going to happen unless somebody is actually being vocal and forcing it to happen. So I think that's something you can need. Or you have the way, I think a little bit that works in the US is that a lot of the large companies, right? Google in some ways enabled a lot of these researchers to kind of be in Google and develop all of these products, right? So if your enterprises are willing to let some of these researchers come in and do work that can be commercialized, that is another model that has worked, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, actually, additional questions, because of the other professors as me. So actually, I think about which directions needed to be more advanced for more long time. However, in that case, at least we need the computational resources because of we need the GPU mainly, and also so because of that academic and also industrial relations needed to get new trial and also need GPU sooner.
Yeah.
So actually, these connections between the great idea and also the great resources, between the connections is really good need to invest.
Absolutely. Like, look, in the US, you had the supercomputers, right? And there was a whole net that the government deployed
And also,
where anybody.
currently 10 billions or investment for the computational resources for the academic use from the United States government.
Yeah. So I think if you're planning to do that, in Japan, I think the government should start an initiative or something that there is a resource, because one of the things that as a professor and your students will not have is access to a lot of computational powers, right? And that is something you need to train these models and to experiment with these models.
Yeah, on that, it does feel like there's a lot of talk right now. There's venture firms that are saying they've bought GPUs, or new cloud providers starting a business with GPUs. The majority of our portfolio doesn't really have an issue accessing it. So I think right now, as a developer, if you just want to get an application working, it's not really an issue. I think everyone's worried about what happens at scale if all these companies really start working and their applications take off. But I do think the good news for a developer right now is if you want to get access to an LLM, a GPU, or whatever, it's possible. But you can't count on it forever, which is why a company like Anthropic has investments from Google and Amazon to make sure they've got long-term capacity at almost infinite scale.
Yeah, actually, current 10 years, this kind of the easy to access environment, also actually this kind of the interfaces or this kind of the infrastructure service is really get them on demand. So because of that, actually, everyone can access, and also this kind of in the ecosystems, new talent came up, new PhD guys, so they got jobs in the new job market for the Google or Amazon's or new research companies. So actually, that is a really good ecosystem for our computer scientists. However, actually, how do you think about the Japanese ecosystems? So because of the current 10 years, this kind of the research field in the computer science really led by United States ecosystems, such in United States University and also in Canada or United States or Silicon Valley. How, from your point of view, how do you think about the Japanese ecosystem from your current 10 years?
Yeah, I mean, because we invest primarily domestically, I don't know that I've got the best view. Trips like this are what help you, learn about those opportunities and challenges. I think the main thing is you just really need to have more environments like this where entrepreneurs can come together, meet each other, figure out how to start something. If you look in Silicon Valley, you have hackathons, meetups, venture capitalists. You can't walk down the street and not hear people talking about a business, or you can't sit and just have a cup of coffee and think about something except people starting a company. And it's that kind of environment that's very infectious in a good way that leads to these things. So I think that's really the underlying challenge that you want to accelerate, and then compute constraints and things like that you'll figure out later. But the main thing is more events and activities that bring all of you together.
Yeah, I also have an outside perspective, right? This first time I'm coming to Japan. I think from an outside in, when I look at it, I think Japan is great in manufacturing, in mechanical engineering, in kind of hardware, building some of the stuff. I think where kind of a lot of the things that have gone towards is more on the software side, right? A lot of value that is created. Along with having the entrepreneurial culture, you also need to have a lot of software talent. And at least from the outside, it seems like, in Japan, there was not a lot of people going into computer science, going into software. And I might be wrong, but that is the thing I have. So I would say, along with kind of encouraging entrepreneurial kind of talent, having founders start companies, I think also having people doing more software, or increasing the level of people who go into software engineering and computer science.
And the good news is now you've got a co-pilot, so everyone
that's right.
Very quickly.
That's right. You can use Copilot to kind of learn that, right?
So yeah, actually, the Copilot and also these language models can be transferred the Japanese to the English or English to the Chinese, or
That's right.
the language barrier is a little bit different situations.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I think that is a good opportunities. And also, actually, we have a last 10 minutes, and so the final part is we'd like to think about how do you think about who is a beginners or who want to be a player of this generative AI field. So, what is your advice to the newcomer of this for the newcomer to the entrepreneurs or new guys to want to become do new a good service or in generative AI fields? So how do you have any advice for the Japanese entrepreneurs?
I mean, I think I framed it up front that I think the infrastructure layer is going to be massive.
Yeah.
It's what has to come together to allow the application layer to happen faster and more in a more innovative way. I think in applications, really think and ask yourself, why is this application going to be different and better than the existing incumbent applications that will add generative AI to? So what's your novel idea that creates kind of a Uber or Snap? And I don't mean just consumer applications, but I mean things that are just different. Like the application wouldn't exist if it weren't for generative AI. So instead of a bolt-on, what's the kind of new thing that can happen because of this? And that's, sometimes you don't know it until you see it, but those are the kinds of things that will come from you, and I would look for that versus something more incremental.
Yeah, and I think it's just being, kind of very customer focused, right? For everybody who's starting companies around generative AI, being very customer focused. Remember, Uber, when it first started, was not the Uber kind of we see it, right?
Yes.
That was the shared rides was not the first thing that they started out with, and that became their main business, right? So some of this stuff is you start out kind of building something and trying to figure out what the problem is and solving it, and then you iterate depending on the customer demand. I do think in generative AI, there is going to be a little bit of a data moat, right?
Yes.
Because the data you get, the way you train the models, the way you kind of keep improving the model so it gets better and better over time.
Yeah.
So understanding how you get the data, how does the data not get to anybody else, how do you kind of, keep the data to yourself, and so I think that will be a kind of a differentiator.
Yes.
And as people and entrepreneurs build and start building new applications and new companies, that is something they have to kind of think about.
Yeah, I'll just add one more thing. I mean, these waves, as we think about, cloud or mobile, they can be 10 years apart. So it's great when one of these is upon us. So I would just encourage everyone to be a little bit more risk-taking.
Yeah.
And I think Jay said it right. Sometimes you just need to kind of get in there and you'll figure it out. But you're going to be so much smarter by getting in there and iterating with the technology and with different ideas than holding and waiting back until it's all more obvious. So that'd be my encouragement.
So actually, then how do you think about these kind of the giants? It means platformers such as Google's or Amazon's or such in the Gen AI field, such as Adobe or everyone. If they do the new service release about the Gen AI, actually that is an environment totally gonna be changed. It means if the OpenAI makes new models or new development about the different areas, that will be small companies or small startups will be so much different, almost disruptive in every service release for each giants of current situations. So how do you think that?
Whether what the question is whether the hyperscalers will kind of dominate in this next iteration?
Yes.
We are venture capitalists. We don't believe that. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a job, right? So we have to believe, and I think it's not obvious yet. There are some on the, I think on the LLM kind of providers, I think it's pretty obvious who will be the winners. But I think everywhere else is really kind of, I think inning zero to kind of say who's going to be winners. And just like, the good example is when Salesforce started, there was a big incumbent, right?
Yeah.
Right.
There was Siebel, and Paul this morning talked about it, and nobody thought that Salesforce,
Yes.
look where Siebel is and where Salesforce is, right?
Yep.
And actually where Salesforce is and where Oracle is, right?
Yep.
Compared to who bought
Yep.
Siebel. So I wish we could predict this, but then if I knew it, I wouldn't tell you. But overall, I think there will be giant companies being created around generative AI.
Yeah.
And no matter what, it's going to push the incumbents harder and faster, and it will reduce prices. And I think we'll kind of see the world settle in a little bit more about what I had on my slide earlier, where there's the foundational models, the main LLMs, and maybe one of the big cloud providers shows up in that box too. But then there's going to be a bunch of open source models, a bunch of very specific custom models. We've already got things like Hugging Face, where you can go grab a model to do basically anything. So I think there's just going to be a wide variety of options depending upon what you're trying to do. And again, that's where the innovation will come from, not one size fits all. OpenAI is not everything. OpenAI is a great writer. You still need a great math model.
And I think the applications are where like things are going to happen, right? I think there's going to be workflow that's going to be automated. There's going to be lots of things. The way we interact with each other is going to, with application, is going to change, right?
Yes.
Like I don't think you're going to be typing and kind of using a mouse. It's all going to be interactive. It's all going to be voice. So all of those things are coming in the horizon. I know it's hard to predict how it's all going to evolve, but because of these changes, I think there's going to be several large companies created not only in the infrastructure layer, but in the middleware as well as in the application layer.
Yeah, well, actually, like for the like other engineers, actually, I'm using the language to like design the applications or software, everything. So that is a little bit dramatically changes in the user interfaces because of like actually generative user interface is now on demand. It means like in the situations like a sound or voice or like a GUI or a pointing device, that is going to be switched to switch like from application to applications.
Yeah.
Such like you use voice recognition or speaking TTS for the like smartphones, and also everyone using typing for the OpenAI for the ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Well, this kind of like transitions from the interface layer, I think that it will be promising for the next like ecosystem or environment. So actually, so how do you last 3 minutes? So what do you like predict next trend? Actually, like so difficult. However, like
I'll build on the one that you mentioned. I think right now, we've got basically data is processed and a smarter output comes out. So there's some reasoning, some language. Maybe you had an application before and it presented a graph, and now you've got some really smart words next to the graph that tell you how to use it better. But I think this is all going to move from just kind of outputting language to taking the next set of actions. And I think that's what you were alluding to, right? So you get the output of that, and it says, here's what I think, just like I mentioned earlier in this, the therapist model, it's going to basically give a recommendation, and then maybe right from there, you diagnose and the patient gets medicine, or in your email, you automatically get airline reservations made. So it's really going to be the way the sequence of things happen. That developer who writes code is going to automatically test it, push it to production, check and see if there's any errors. There is an error, it's going to come back and automatically test it on its own and push it back out and keep iterating. So these automated iteration cycles are going to happen at light speed, and we're going to have a lot more closed loops than open-ended loops.
Yes. And as Matt said, I think workflows for everything, workflows for accountants, workflows for doctors, workflows for therapists, workflows for everything, I think is going to get automated and is going to get much faster and easier to do things, right? I think those things are it's really hard to kind of predict how it's all going to evolve, but I think that is really where, the impact of generative AI will actually be felt.
Yeah, workflow changes, this kind of testing environment or application environment changes. So the last minute, I wanted to raise an example for my students.
Yeah.
Actually, one of my PhD students, she said to me, I have no idea to do the research. Okay, please ask ChatGPT. Then she built the own like AutoGPT environment because there is open source of AutoGPT environment. Actually, she asked GPT for the titles. She asks about the experiment. So actually, she instructed by the GPT all things for the write paper. Then paper accepted. Then he wanted one of the ticket to get PhD. However, this kind of the way, like by combining the like Gen AI or people, students, or like newcomers. I think that will be like a different, different windows
Yeah.
to new business or new ideas. So I think that will be hopeful for the younger generations, or to get rid of the language barriers. Yeah.
And you know, I think what's going to happen is the real effect will take place when the kids who are growing up now, the people who are 4 or 5 years old.
Yes.
Because even my kids who are teenagers, they haven't seen a world with ChatGPT,
Yeah,
right?
they are native.
Although they use it a little bit. I
Yes.
think the kids even younger than that, as they grow, they'll be like, just like my kids can't imagine a world without cell phones.
Yeah.
Right.
They will come up, and that's when the
Yes.
real use cases will
Yes.
start popping up.
Yeah, new educations or new
Yeah.
videos. So I think that is a hopefully for human next endeavors. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's time. So thank you so much for everyone, and also I have get applause for the nice two speakers on for the nice sessions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Appreciate it. Thank you. Great.
ありがとうございました。Thank you so much.
Yeah.